Sporting Journal Radio, presented by Onyx.
Well, if you're living somewhere in the reach of this show right here, at least the broadcast reach in Minnesota, Dakotas, Wisconsin, this upper Midwest area, you're well aware of the boundary waters and the proposed mining, the mining operation that's been proposed up there, Twin Metals, and the dangers that could pose for the watershed up there. Well, something similar is happening in Alaska. The Pebble mine construction in Bristol Bay, Alaska. In 2008, there was estimation that it was quite the ore deposit, maybe the second largest of its type in the world. The project would employ a lot of people. It'd bring a big economic impact to the area. There's just a lot of things about this. You know, that's always a tough thing when you talk about mining, because it can provide a lot of jobs, but you wonder where the balance is to what the impact on the environment would be. And the issue in Alaska is what it'll do to that watershed. And all 5 Eastern Pacific salmon species spawn in Bristol Bay's freshwater tributaries. The bay is home to the world's largest commercial sockeye salmon fishery. This is a big deal. And the EPA asked for a Clean Water Act protection on parts of the bay in 2021, which would essentially block this mine project. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Our guest is Scott Haight. He's a sporting outreach director for businesses for Bristol Bay. And you can tell me a lot more about this project. I just know kind of what's going on up there, but I would like to get into the details a little bit and just talk about what impact this will have on this fishery, because obviously this fishery has a huge economic impact as well, not just for the businesses there, but just for anglers, people that like to eat salmon, and of course people that rely on it for eating it every day, people that live there. Scott, where are we at right now in this project, and what are the odds of stopping it?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show to talk about a really important issue. We are right now nearing the conclusion of a long process that the EPA has undertaken with the Clean Water Act that would protect the Bristol Bay region, a segment of the Bristol Bay region, which, as you noted, is a pretty big and important wild salmon fishery. I'll just give you a quick backstory on where Bristol Bay is. The Bristol Bay region is southwest Alaska, roughly 200 miles southwest of Anchorage, and it's remote. You can only get there by flying or by water. And in this region, you have got a number of major salmon-producing watersheds, and this area is responsible for about half the global supply of wild sockeye salmon.
Wow.
That sounds pretty big, and indeed it is. Over the last 10 years, I think the average return is upwards of 40 million fish, but that average each year is moving up because for the last several years, Bristol Bay has set records for the overall sockeye return. Last year in 2021, the sockeye return was 66 million fish, and that's an absolutely enormous amount of protein. You know, like I said, over half the world's supply of wild sockeye salmon comes from Bristol Bay. So you can go to, Cub Foods, you can go to Hy-Vee markets, some of the big chains in the Midwest, and you will find wild Bristol Bay sockeye salmon in their seafood areas. So this year, the numbers are even more staggering. This year, as of July 31st, when I believe Alaska Department of Fish and Game kind of stopped counting, they were at 78 million plus sockeye salmon came back to Bristol Bay. So this is a fishery that is unprecedented. It's unmatched on planet Earth. And it's a fishery that has been so well managed and has such productive habitat that they have been commercial fishing this area for 130 plus years. Sport fishing has gone on there for half a century. And before any of those, the native folks of the region have been depending upon these runs of salmon for millennia for their entire existence. So the fishery is estimated to be worth $2.2 billion every single year, and it employs 15,000 people in that fishery. So it's both an amazing ecological resource, as well as an economic powerhouse.
Yeah, so I mean that's usually the big argument for some of these mines is what it's going to do economically for the region. But it sounds like that fishery is a bigger benefit economically there, obviously.
Well, most people do tend to agree with that, and the overwhelming sentiment in the region, the folks who've been promised heaven and earth for if you let us build this mine, this is what it'll do for you. The overwhelming sentiment in the region is and has been for 15, 20 years, no thanks. We are just fine with the way things are right now. We don't want to risk what we have for the potential that this mine could possibly bring someday. So, the region sentiment is extremely against building the mine and in favor of protecting the fishery. And in Alaska, a state which is generally pretty favorable toward resource development projects, even statewide, the majority of people don't think that the Pebble mine in Bristol Bay is worth the risk. So it's pretty much an outlier when you talk about Alaska big conservation battles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why most people live in Alaska, right? To be able to live off the land a little bit and enjoy it. And anytime there's a risk to their way of life, they're not going to like it. And talk about that risk just a little bit. Like what does this mine do, and what is the potential danger from this mine to the fishery?
Okay. Well, for starters, we've already touched on this is a remote region. There are very few roads in the region. You have to fly to get out there. The construction of the mine would entail an enormous amount of infrastructure. For starters, you're talking a deep water port on Cook Inlet, where the mine would bring their product to. You would have to have a pipeline from there that would go around or across Lake Iliamna, which is the biggest freshwater lake in Alaska, out to the mine site, which is on the north side of Lake Iliamna. So you would have a road corridor that would have to get punched through all the way out to the site. It would require a power plant, and this is pretty unbelievable. They'd need a power plant, and the one that they're proposing would be large enough to power more than the city of Fairbanks, Alaska, which is the second biggest city in Alaska. Wow. So all of that infrastructure is number one, and the roads and everything, crossing dozens and dozens and dozens of rivers and streams that support this enormous salmon resource. Salmon are anadromous fish. They go to the ocean, they come back a few years, and they return to the stream that they were spawned in. So those are the risks just for starters. The mine itself, the company has proposed what we like to refer to as kind of like a starter mine. The deposit we've touched on is pretty darn large, but they are proposing, hey, let's just build a little mine right now to start with, and then they feel it's probably easier to get a small mine permitted than a large one. And if they were ever able to get that permitted and into operation, then of course they're not going to stop with the small mine. They will keep going till they develop the full extent of that deposit. And estimates are, if that deposit were fully developed, you're talking about 11 billion tons of mine waste that will have to be stored in perpetuity. And another way to say that is that has to be stored until the sun burns out. I mean, you're talking this deposit, while it is quite large, while it is very large, is extremely low grade. It is very low grade in the valuable minerals. It's very high grade in sulfide. So to extract the valuable minerals from the waste, which is going to be 97, 98% plus, is going to have to remain there on site. And it's such high sulfide content that exposed to air and water, that's going to create basically its acid mine drainage, roughly equivalent of sulfuric acid. So you've got that. Their proposal is to build enormous tailings ponds behind enormous dams. We're talking miles long, the dams, 700 feet high, and storing 11 billion tons of mine waste forever in an area that, oh, by the way, is very seismically active.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think anyone goes into a project, thinking, hey, we're going to mess this up. No, there's no doubt that they think they can do it. I think that's just about the highest level of hubris to really think you can control things like this. I just look back and you've got a few factors that can cause things to go wrong. One is a natural disaster. That's like the Fukushima power plant over in Japan. The earthquake and the resulting tsunami caused that big problem. And I just said that we're dealing with an area in Alaska that's very earthquake prone. And then the second is human error. Despite the best engineering, despite the best intentions, you can't, engineer your way out of every single risk. And the human error thing is like, look at the Deepwater Horizon, what that did in the Gulf of Mexico. So I think most people look at this and they say, yeah, the mine would be very large and it could bring some benefits to a limited number of people for a limited period of time. But what exists there today has supported the residents of the region for millennia, has supported a thriving commercial fishery that's not dwindling. It's in fact, blowing records out of the water the last couple of years. And also to touch on, something I think that this audience would like to hear about. I mean, it is God's honest truth, one of the finest bucket list sporting destinations on planet Earth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unreal. Alaska is pretty incredible sportsman's paradise, but I think even if you look at Alaska and talk to folks who have been to different places, Bristol Bay, Southwest Alaska is widely regarded as the best of the best.
Well, Alaska's number one on my bucket list. I haven't been up there yet, and I'm anxious. And it's almost like I'd want to do it, just go up for about a year, just so I can experience all the things I keep hearing about with all the opportunity that's up there. So I want to just back up a little bit and talk about some of those numbers that you brought up. So yeah, you mentioned that there is a lot of metal there. So we're talking about copper and gold, right, as a mineral, what they're trying to mine up there. But 98% of what they'll mine will be waste. I mean, so the percentage of that of copper and gold that they're going to be, the stuff that they're pulling out of the ground, what they're looking for is a very small part. And then everything else, 98% plus of what they're going to pull out, they have to store forever.
That is true. It is a very large deposit, but it is extremely low grade.
Yep. And that, so, and when you talk about how they store, like how are they planning to store it? It's ponds, basically, tailings ponds.
Yeah. Enormous tailings ponds, lakes, lagoons, whatever you want to refer to it. Like I said, the dams that they're going to create to hold this stuff back. I mean, literally, the plans are like 700 feet tall and several miles long. I mean, it's and how would you like that hanging over the biggest salmon runs on Earth? Yeah,
well, and hasn't there been something with migratory birds that have landed in ponds like that as well? Hasn't there been issues with that?
Yeah, I think you're probably referring to the Berkeley Pit in Butte, Montana, where they employ people, I think, these days to scare off the waterfowl that think they're going to take a break and land in that pit, because once they land in there, they usually don't make it out.
They all die. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, copper and gold, obviously people are always looking for copper and gold, and for one, because it's valuable. The copper, where would that, what would they be doing with this? Where would the copper end up?
There's nothing that says that they have to have it processed and used in the United States of America. Resources like this are sold into the global market. So you can't say with 100% certainty, but there's, a pretty high likelihood given the location and, ease of shipping in the Pacific, who knows? I mean, is that stuff going to be bound for, Asia, China?
Potentially not America, of course. Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that says, that they have to, if you take it out of America, you have to, keep it in America.
So this company is a Canadian company, and then there's been other investors that have walked away from this project?
Yeah, the backers of the Pebble project is called the Pebble Limited Partnership, and they're a subsidiary of Hunter Dickinson, which is based out of Canada. But over the years, they have had financial partners who have assisted with exploration costs and other operating costs. But over the course of time, some of the biggest mining companies on earth have been involved but no longer are. The ones that have walked away include Mitsubishi, a company called Anglo American, which is one of the biggest mining companies in the world, Rio Tinto. So these companies, some to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars invested in this project, for one reason or another, decided, hey, we probably have more viable prospects that we can put our money toward in other places in the world that aren't going to face the problems that developing the Pebble mine is going to face. And all of those companies that I just mentioned no longer are part of the project. They've just cut their losses.
How is this still a thing? I mean, when you have people like that backing out all the time, and then obviously this has been going on for a number of years now, a lot of opposition, a lot of local opposition to it. I'm just surprised that they're still trying to build the thing. Now, I want to bring up a date that's coming up very close, because right now the public, so anybody watching this or listening to this, they can comment and say, hey, do not build this mine, correct?
That is correct. Right now, we talked a little bit about the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is engaged in a process under the Clean Water Act that could see two of the major river systems in Bristol Bay, two of which whose headwaters originate in the area of the Pebble deposit, could see these waters receive a much higher level of protection. It's a very rarely used part of the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act has been law of the land since the 1970s. And under the Clean Water Act, when a company wants to build a project like this that's going to have impacts toward water, the Army Corps of Engineers gets involved to review what's called a Section 404 permit. And this could be anything from, a small road project up to and including what we're talking about here, the Pebble mine. And the Army Corps looks at tens of thousands of these permit applications on an annual basis. And the EPA has oversight authority where in certain very rare instances, this being one of them, they take a look at a project and say, you know what, what's being proposed here is certainly going to cause significant adverse impacts to the water resources and all that those water resources support. So for that reason, EPA does have oversight authority and veto authority on this permit. So the process that's going on right now, the EPA is taking public comments until September 6th. And what they're proposing are a set of prohibitions on mine waste disposal in the immediate area of the Pebble deposit, and also a series of restrictions in a broader geographic area that would place some pretty severe restrictions on what sort of impacts could happen to flowing water, to wetlands, lakes, and ponds, and to stream flow as far as reduction in the stream flow levels on a broader set of waters in Bristol Bay. So we're hopeful. This process has been going on for quite a long time. In 2010, locals in the region, tribes in the region, as well as commercial fishermen, sport fishing operators, was led by the tribal interests in the region, petitioned the EPA to get involved in using this part of the Clean Water Act. And as I said, it's pretty rarely used. As I noted, tens of thousands of permit applications are reviewed by the Army Corps every year. In the history of the Clean Water Act, what's being proposed in Bristol Bay is something that the EPA has only done 13 times. So they only use it in the most extreme and the most rare of instances. And when you're talking about the resources that exist in Bristol Bay and the threat posed to those resources by something like Pebble, I think it's pretty clear most people agree that if you're going to use this tool anywhere, and it's a very surgical, laser-focused tool, if you're going to use it anywhere, this is a pretty good place to do so. So the public can comment until the 6th of September on these proposed restrictions. And the website is stoppebblemine.org. Oh, you've got it right on the screen. Perfect. So we have garnered support from folks all across the country. There's been a number of these public comment periods over the years. like I said, the Army Corps or the EPA was petitioned back in 2010, and they undertook a process from like 2014 to 2016, and that got delayed by litigation. The mining companies sued the federal government to halt this thing, and we've emerged from the litigation slowdown, and now EPA, we're hoping they'll finish the job. And this is the final opportunity for folks to comment. Over the years, we have had cumulatively millions of individuals who care about places like Alaska, who care about salmon, whether it's, I love the taste and the nutrition that wild salmon provides when I feed it to my family, to folks who love to go to Bristol Bay and, catch fish commercially. It's thousands of small business owners, basically, is what you've got. All those permit holders, a lot are from Alaska, a lot are from the Pacific Northwest, but there's folks from Minnesota who have permits to fish up there. There's folks from Montana, folks from Pennsylvania, folks from pretty much all over the country have direct jobs fishing in that commercial fishery. And then you've got the lodges and outfitter camps, and those employ guides from all across the country as well. That's obviously a more seasonal operation, but it's something that whether you dream of going to Alaska someday, or you've been there before and you can't wait to go back, Bristol Bay is, there you go, best of the best. There's not too many places where you can be tight with a 28-inch rainbow trout with brown bears in the river looking for salmon.
Yeah, it's a wild place, man, and it needs to be protected, and our waters need to be protected. And that's one thing we've really tried to push hard here with our show, is just how important keeping water clean and water conservation is everywhere. It's kind of the lifeblood of our planet, and we need to protect it, and not just for people who like to fish and the wildlife, but just for clean drinking water and healthy living across our planet. So it's important to protect these places. And this project, of course, sounds familiar because a lot of people here back in Minnesota know about this mine project up in the Boundary Waters. And the Boundary Waters is still one of my favorite places on the planet. And even when the argument comes up every year about building cell phone towers up there, or allowing more motors to be used in different parts, and as nice it is to have a motor in some of those places, I'm glad that there isn't. You got to keep these places wild and clean, and protect them forever, because if not, they're all going to get destroyed. And then you're just not going to have places like this anymore. And a little bit about the Boundary Waters. You're from Minnesota, right, originally?
Indeed. I grew up in Gaylord, Minnesota, down by Mankato, went to school at St. Olaf in Northfield. So spent the first 21, 22 years of my life living in Minnesota. Still bang my head against the wall every year, follow the Vikings. And after Minnesota, I lived in South Dakota for till I was just about 50. So
that seems like a natural.
Waters is a place that is.
I was just going to say that's a natural transition, going from Minnesota to South Dakota. That's normal, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good crossing of people going either direction in that equation. But I mean, I loved South Dakota, I loved pheasant hunt and everything like that. So it was good time living there. My little brother actually is a pharmacist over in South Dakota, in Aberdeen, up in the northeast part of the state. And quick tiny story on him. He went to school to be a pharmacist, and to finish his school, he had his choice of the University of Minnesota or South Dakota State University. And he, honest to God, weighed it by saying, downtown Twin Cities or biggest flyway in Central America,
yes.
in biggest flyway in North America, plus really good fishing. I think I'm going to go to Brookings.
Yeah, that's smart. That is a smart move right there. I would say the same thing. Make the same decision.
Yeah. But back to the Boundary Waters. You brought that up, and I totally sidetracked it. Sorry, man, I hijacked that. No, my family, they took us to they took me and my brother to the Boundary Waters every single summer. Sometimes more than once. Went up there a couple times to Ely in the winter. I was probably about 10 years old, and the lodge owner said, "Hey, you want to go on a sled dog ride?" And
oh, sweet.
I'm like, yeah, sure. So I rode in the sled, And Bob, the lodge owner, took the dogs out, and we went whipping through these roads and trails in the woods. And like a day later, he thought, "Oh, this kid knows what he's doing. Hey, Scott, do you want to take the dogs out?" I'm like, I just rode along yesterday. He said, "That's fine. They know the trail. They'll just go right where they're supposed to go."
Yeah.
Okay. So 10-year-old Scott thinks, "Oh, he thinks I can do it. Let's do it." So get across the county road, and we are off into the woods. And we were maybe 2 turns into this thing, and I'm off laying in the snow, and the dogs just kept going. and I thought, oh God, are they going to get the sled and the ropes, all tangled around some trees? So I walked the whole route.
Oh boy.
Only to get back to the lodge. Everybody's wondering where Scott was because the dogs have been back for a long time.
Yeah, that's funny.
That was my last sled dogging experience.
You should do it again. I got, I didn't quite have that situation. I've done it twice now. We filmed a couple TV shows up there around Ely and did it, went fishing by sled dog, which was a lot of fun. And the second time we went up
trout.
For lake trout. Yeah. Well, the first time was for stream trout, for brookies and splake. And then the second, and rainbows. And then the second time we went for Lakers on Burnside. And when we got done, I think we had three teams of sled dogs out there, and I was on my own, but basically I was in the middle, and the dogs just followed the trail like that and followed the guys in front. So for the most part, I was all right. So I was getting kind of cocky, like I'm pretty good at this dog sled thing. I know what I'm doing. And he's like, one of the guys is like, "Well, do you want to take the fun trail back?" I was like, "Yeah, let's go." So we were going through the woods, and pretty soon we were cooking, and we were going around turns and bends like this. And pretty soon I was up, like at one point the sled was up in the air and came down, and then I was going around a corner like this, and I just couldn't hang on anymore, and I bailed, and the dogs just kept right on trucking, and they caught up to the next sled, and then the guy running that one had to run his and then jump into the other one and kind of fall into the other one and stop them both at the same time. Got most of it on camera because I had GoPros on the sled, and they kept going while I was still laying face down in the snow back in the woods. So it was quite an experience, and we had pretty good fishing up there too. So it was pretty neat, and that and then so you obviously spent a lot of time in the boundary waters and kind of know what it means to protect that area as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, you think the boundary waters, you think Bristol Bay, you think places like, Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon. I mean, all of these are iconic places in America, iconic landscapes, amazing public lands. And the more we move into the future, the seemingly fewer of those places there are in the world,
yeah.
which means those that remain are that much more valuable. So, the Boundary Waters is the most heavily visited wilderness area in the country. So it makes complete sense, and there's a lot of strong economic regions for protecting the Boundary Waters as well. The tourism industry in Ely and on the Gunflint Trail and stuff like that, certainly. And there's folks who have chosen to make their homes in northeastern Minnesota because of the quality of life that it gives them, and the fact that you can work remotely from a lot of places these days. I mean, places like that are going to be very attractive. So, yeah, I mean, we went to Basswood, we went to Gabbro, all those lakes. I mean, some of them are real close to where that Twin Metals mine is proposed. So that one hits close to home. When
you hear people, particularly up on the on the range up in northern Minnesota, mining is a big part of the culture there, and it's been a big part of industry and the economy, and it obviously provides a lot of jobs, gives those people a way of life up there. But at what risk, obviously, with some of these mines, it's just not worth it. And when you look at Pebble Mine in Alaska, and you talk about, well, it's going to provide all these jobs. Well, you can shoot that down right away when you talk about 15,000 jobs in the fishery, and that's a sustainable economy. That's a sustainable. It's healthy for the planet. It's healthy for the fishery. It's providing a lot of jobs. It's a huge economic impact. So to me, it's a no-brainer to, that you can't tell me that this mine is going to provide, that the job argument is a better one than what's already there.
Yeah, I mean, I just think back. Alaska has a former U.S. senator, the late Ted Stevens, and Senator Stevens was an ardent pro resource development politician. And Senator Stevens, he came out after looking at the Pebble, proposals. He came out and just said, you know what, this is the wrong mine in the wrong place. It's certainly something that could be beneficial, but the location is horrible for something like this. A former governor of Alaska, a guy named Jay Hammond, he actually supposedly said that the only worst place that he could think of building the Pebble mine would be in his living room. So, and like I said, yeah, look at that. I mean, look at that. That's, they call them leopard rainbows. They're so spotted. I mean, they have spots on their eyes, for crying out loud. Those fish in Bristol Bay, I talked before when that picture of the bear was up there about, oh yeah, you can like be in a river with bears and you're tight to a 28 inch rainbow trout. You're going to catch that, and your guide will net it, and you're going to be like, oh my God, that's the fish of my life. And your guide will have no qualms breaking your heart by telling you, yeah, that's a pretty nice fish, but it takes 30 to be a trophy here.
Yeah.
That's how good it is. I mean, one of the first times, actually the first time that I took my wife on a trip and we went to Bristol Bay, back in the early days of doing what I do, I would spend the winter months, sport show season. I would spend the winter months traveling the country from coast to coast, and every weekend I was somewhere else from Thursday through, I'd come home on Monday and, get some clean clothes in the suitcase and take off again to go to the next show. I got to play, I'd like to say I got to play Johnny Appleseed running around Pebble Mine. And that's up to Bristol Bay. And we did a fly out, and our guide happened to be a young guy from Minnesota. He's a muskie guide up around Leech and Mille Lacs, and he was our guide on a fly out trip down the Alaska Peninsula. And that day, we caught a mess of king salmon, Chinooks, and every fish that Nikki caught was larger than any fish she had ever caught in her life prior to that day. And for many years, the screensaver on my computer was Adam, our guide, holding this, close to 40-pound king salmon, and Nikki standing next to him with this huge, huge smile on her face. And we got to the end of the day, and she said, when you're gone in the winter, all those days and weeks, it really does suck. It's not very easy. She said, but now that I've been here just once, I get it. This place is unreal. So, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of experience that people have. That's the kind of experience that Bristol Bay provides, just on the sporting side of things. And then you talk about everything else that we discussed about what else it supports. And it is, as you already said, it's a no-brainer. It's hard to believe that so many people have had to work so hard for so long for something that seems so completely obvious. But here we are, and we're getting, we believe, hopefully close to the end. And if we can get the EPA to finish these Clean Water Act protections, then we will secure lasting and durable protections for at least a certain part of Bristol Bay. And in the future, we'll look at, options to expand those protections.
So,
and that's, potential legislation down the line. But big focus right now, getting the EPA to finish the job.
So that's what we're commenting right now, is we're basically telling the EPA, yes, we want you to keep working on this.
We want you to finish this process, provide the protection that can provide, and they have every opportunity to do this. And we're hopeful that by the end of 2022 or sometime early in 2023, we can get it done.
All right. Very good. There's a website, stoppebbleminenow.org. We'll link it on our website and on our social media too, or if you're watching this, we'll put it down in the comments below. Scott Haight, Sporting Outreach Director for Businesses for Bristol Bay. Keep up the good work, and thanks for explaining the situation and giving us some time here on the show today.
No, thank you for having me. And before I sign off, I am going to say, thanks to everyone across the country who has taken time out of their life to, send a comment over the years, because they truly all do matter. We need you one more time before September 6th. And I also want to give a big shout out to the sporting industry. I mean, it's been amazing to work with brands from the fishing side to the hunting side. I mean, I like to say I've got everybody from like fly rods to firearms on our side of saying, let's protect Bristol Bay, because, on top of the fishing, it's a pretty darn good spot to, chase caribou and moose and brown bear.
Well, if you like the outdoors, this is a cause to get behind. Absolutely. And, so let's get it stopped. September 6th is that deadline to put the comment in. And then you think we could hear something about what the EPA is going to do by the end of the year, early next year?
Yeah, that's the timeline that we are asking the EPA to act on. I mean, it's gone on far too long, and they can do it in that timeline. We just have to prod them, I think.
So let me ask you this then: if they do, what are we asking them to do? They would continue to push for protections. Is there more than what they've already talked about? And then what would that do? Would that essentially shut this down? Would they try to mine somewhere else, you think, or would that just completely end the conversation?
Yeah. The proposed restrictions that are on the table right now that people are commenting on would go a very long way to ensuring that these waters are protected and the Pebble mine would not be able to be built. So that's what we're dealing with. I mean, once September 6th rolls around, that's the end of public comment period. The EPA will compile all those comments, look at other stuff that they have learned over the last several months, and then come out with their final proposal.
StopPebbleMineNow.org. Scott, thanks a lot. If there's any other messages you want us to help try to spread the word about, let me know.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hear more at sportingjournalradio.com or wherever you get podcasts. Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet, and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today.